The Miller family's living room was filled with an uncomfortable chill. Tom and Sarah sat on the worn couch, their faces etched with worry as they discussed their mounting bills. The harsh winter had driven up their heating costs, forcing them to make difficult choices. "We need to cut back on the heat," Tom said, his voice low to avoid alarming the children. "It's either that or we start skipping meals." Sarah nodded reluctantly, her eyes drifting to the window where Emily and Jake played in the snow. The children's laughter contrasted sharply with the heavy atmosphere inside. "They shouldn't have to suffer because of our financial troubles," Sarah murmured. As night fell, Tom ventured out to gather firewood, hoping to save on electricity. The bitter cold bit at his exposed skin as he moved through the backyard. Suddenly, he noticed a dark shape huddled against the garden shed. Tom's heart raced as he approached, realizing it was a man sleeping in the frigid air. He hesitated, recalling recent news reports about break-ins and safety concerns. But something about the man's vulnerable position tugged at Tom's conscience. After a moment's deliberation, Tom gently shook the man awake. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold air. The man, who introduced himself as Ray, looked up with weary eyes. Tom felt a mix of fear and determination as he made a decision that would change their lives. "It's freezing out here. Why don't you come inside and warm up?" Tom offered, surprising himself with his own words. From the doorway, Sarah watched the scene unfold, her expression a mixture of concern and uncertainty. As Tom helped Ray to his feet, she wondered if they were making a grave mistake or embarking on something transformative. The family's act of compassion, born from their own struggles, was about to set in motion a series of events that would challenge their perceptions and redefine their understanding of empathy. The Miller's small kitchen was filled with an uneasy silence as Ray sat at the table, gratefully accepting a bowl of hot soup. Tom and Sarah exchanged nervous glances, trying to mask their apprehension with forced smiles. The children, Emily and Jake, watched the stranger with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Thank you for your kindness," Ray said, his voice rough from disuse. "It's been a long time since I've had a warm meal." Sarah nodded, her maternal instincts overriding her initial fear. "You're welcome. Everyone deserves a hot meal, especially on a night like this." As Ray ate, Tom cautiously probed for information. "So, Ray, how did you end up? Well, out there?" Ray paused, his spoon hovering midair. The children leaned in, sensing a story. "It's a long tale," he began, "but I suppose you deserve to know, given your generosity." He recounted his past, a successful business career, a loving family, a life that seemed perfect from the outside. But then came the economic downturn, bad investments, and a series of unfortunate events that spiraled out of control. "I lost everything," Ray said, his eyes distant. "My job, my savings, my home. My family couldn't handle the stress and left. Before I knew it, I was on the streets." Emily, her young face scrunched in confusion, piped up, "But how can someone lose everything? Don't grown-ups have things figured out?" Ray smiled sadly. "Life isn't always that simple, little one. Sometimes, no matter how much you plan, things can fall apart." Jake, who had been quietly observing, noticed the pain in Ray's eyes. He felt a connection, recognizing a similar worry he'd seen in his parents' faces during their recent financial struggles. As Ray finished his story, the kitchen fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a moment of shared understanding, a glimpse into the fragility of life that connected this stranger to the Miller family in an unexpected way. The next morning, the Miller family awoke to an unexpected sight. Through their frosted window, they watched in disbelief as Ray emerged from a gleaming black limousine parked outside their modest home. Tom and Sarah exchanged bewildered looks, their minds racing with questions and doubts. "What's going on?" Tom muttered, his brow furrowed in confusion. Sarah shook her head, equally perplexed. As Ray approached their front door, the family gathered in the living room, unsure of what to expect. When they opened the door, Ray stood before them, no longer in tattered clothes but dressed in an impeccable suit. "I owe you an explanation," Ray began, his demeanor markedly different from the night before. "I'm not actually homeless. I'm a philanthropist who's been living on the streets to better understand the struggles of those less fortunate. The revelation hit the family like a tidal wave. Tom's face reddened with a mix of embarrassment and anger, feeling as though he'd been deceived. Sarah, on the other hand, appeared more intrigued than upset. So, last night was what? Some kind of test? Tom asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. Ray shook his head. Not a test, but an experience. Your kindness was genuine, and that's exactly what I've been searching for. Emily and Jake listened intently, their young minds processing this turn of events with less judgment than their parents. To them, the idea seemed almost exciting, like something out of a movie. But why go to such extremes? Sarah inquired, her initial shock giving way to curiosity. Ray's expression softened, because true empathy can't be understood from a distance. I needed to live it, to feel the cold, the hunger, the desperation. And in doing so, I've also found the warmth of human kindness in unexpected places, like your home. As Ray explained further, Tom and Sarah's doubt began to waver. The children's innocent acceptance of the situation prompted the adults to reflect on their own reactions. They realized that their initial empathy hadn't been misplaced, even if the circumstances were different than they'd imagined. This revelation would prove to be just the beginning of a journey that would challenge the Millers' perceptions and redefine their understanding of compassion and community. Ray, still standing in the Millers' living room, shifted his weight as he prepared to make an offer. Your kindness last night was extraordinary, he began. I'd like to repay you, not just with financial assistance, but with an opportunity to join my foundation. Tom's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Financial assistance? He echoed, his mind immediately racing to their mounting bills. Sarah, however, focused on the latter part of Ray's statement. What kind of opportunity? She asked, leaning forward with interest. Ray explained his foundation's mission: to create a network of compassionate individuals working to improve their communities. We provide resources and support, but the real change comes from people like you, those willing to open their hearts and homes to others in need. Tom's expression turned hesitant. I don't know, he said, glancing at Sarah. We're already stretched thin with work and the kids. I'm not sure we have the time for something like this. Sarah, however, saw a glimmer of hope in Ray's offer. But Tom, she interjected, think about what this could mean for us, for the community. Maybe this is the change we've been needing. As the adults debated, Emily and Jake listened intently. The children, inspired by the previous night's events and Ray's story, saw an exciting opportunity. Dad, Mom, Emily piped up, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. We want to help too. We can make a real difference. Jake nodded vigorously in agreement. Yeah, and we promise to do our chores without complaining if you say yes, he added, causing a ripple of laughter to break the tension. Ray smiled at the children's eagerness. Your whole family would be involved, he assured them. It's about creating a culture of empathy, starting right here in your home. Tom and Sarah exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. The prospect was daunting, but the potential for positive change was undeniable. Their children's excitement only amplified the appeal of Ray's offer. Can we have some time to think about it? Tom asked, his tone softer now. Ray nodded understandingly. Of course, this is a big decision. But remember, sometimes the most rewarding journeys begin with a single step of compassion, like the one you took last night. As Ray prepared to leave, the Miller family found themselves at a crossroads, pondering a decision that could alter the course of their lives and potentially transform their entire community. Weeks passed, and the Miller family found themselves immersed in their new roles with Ray's foundation. What had started as a hesitant agreement had blossomed into a full-fledged commitment. Tom and Sarah, initially skeptical, were now at the forefront of local fundraising campaigns and community service initiatives. On a crisp Saturday morning, the family gathered at the community center preparing for a food drive. Emily and Jake eagerly sorted donations, their enthusiasm infectious. I never thought I'd be spending my weekends like this, Tom admitted to Sarah as they organized volunteers. But seeing the impact we're making, it's incredible. Sarah nodded in agreement, her eyes scanning the bustling room. It's changing us too, Tom. Look at the kids. They've never been more engaged. As they worked, the Millers encountered individuals from all walks of life, each with their own story of hardship. A single mother struggling to feed her children, an elderly man unable to afford his medications, a young couple facing eviction. These were no longer abstract concepts, but real people with faces and names. The reality of poverty in their community became increasingly tangible, forging a strong bond among the volunteers. The Millers found themselves forming deep connections with people they might never have met otherwise. One day, as they were setting up for a community meal, their neighbor, Mr. Johnson, approached. Known for his skepticism and initial hostility towards Ray's presence in the neighborhood, he had been watching the Millers' activities with growing curiosity. "I've got to hand it to you," Mr. Johnson said, his gruff voice tinged with reluctant admiration. "When that Ray fella first showed up, I thought it was all a bunch of hogwash. But seeing what you're doing here, well, maybe I was wrong." Tom smiled, extending his hand. "It's never too late to join in, Mr. Johnson. We could always use another pair of hands." As Mr. Johnson hesitantly accepted a volunteer vest, the Millers exchanged knowing glances. They realized that their journey wasn't just about helping those in need. It was about transforming their entire community, one person at a time. The change they were witnessing, both in themselves and in their neighbors, was a testament to the power of empathy and action. What had begun as a single act of kindness on a cold night was now rippling outward, touching lives in ways they never could have imagined. As winter gave way to spring, Tom and Sarah found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of activity. They were organizing a large community event aimed at raising funds and awareness for the homeless in Maplewood. The dining room table, once a place for family meals, was now covered in planning documents and volunteer sign-up sheets. "We need to secure at least 50 more sponsors," Tom muttered, poring over a list of local businesses. Sarah nodded, her phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with caterers. The event was ambitious, a town-wide gathering featuring testimonials from those who had experienced homelessness, educational booths, and a charity auction. It was far beyond anything the Millers had attempted before, pushing them out of their comfort zone. As they worked tirelessly on the preparations, they encountered unexpected resistance. Not everyone in Maplewood shared their newfound enthusiasm for helping the homeless. During a town council meeting to discuss the event, several residents voiced their concerns. "Won't this just attract more homeless people to our town?" one woman asked, her voice sharp with worry. "I'm concerned about safety," another man chimed in. "These people can be unpredictable." Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, realizing the depth of the prejudices they were up against. It was a stark reminder that changing minds would be as crucial as raising funds. Undeterred, they redoubled their efforts to educate the community. Emily and Jake, inspired by their parents' determination, took it upon themselves to spread awareness at school. Emily created posters challenging stereotypes about homelessness, while Jake organized a penny drive in his class. Their youthful enthusiasm began to influence their classmates, and by extension, their classmates' parents. One afternoon, as Sarah was distributing flyers downtown, she encountered Mrs. Peterson, a longtime resident known for her conservative views. "I hear you're behind all this homeless hullabaloo," Mrs. Peterson said, eyeing the flyers suspiciously. Sarah took a deep breath, preparing for confrontation. Instead, she was surprised by what came next. "My grandson told me about what your kids are doing at school," Mrs. Peterson continued. "It got me thinking maybe I've been too quick to judge." This small victory energized the Millers. They realized that change was possible, one conversation at a time. As the event drew nearer, they saw more residents coming around, offering to volunteer or donate. The challenges were far from over, but Tom and Sarah felt a growing sense of hope. They were not just planning an event. They were slowly but surely shifting the heart of their community. The day of the community event arrived, transforming the local park into a bustling hub of activity. Colorful banners fluttered in the breeze, and the air was filled with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. Tom and Sarah, running on coffee and adrenaline, darted from booth to booth, ensuring everything was in place. As people began to arrive, the Millers watched with growing amazement. The The turnout was far larger than they had anticipated, with faces both familiar and new in the crowd. The event kicked off with a series of speakers sharing their experiences with homelessness. The raw honesty of their stories captivated the audience, challenging preconceptions and stirring emotions. One woman's account of losing her home after a medical crisis left many in tears. A young man's journey from the streets to college drew applause. Each story wove a tapestry of human resilience that touched even the most skeptical hearts. As the day progressed, the Millers felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. People who had arrived with crossed arms and furrowed brows were now engaging in conversations, asking questions, and even signing up to volunteer. Midway through the event, Mr. Johnson, the once skeptical neighbor, approached the podium. The crowd hushed, curious about what this known critic had to say. "I've lived in Maplewood all my life," he began, his voice gruff with emotion. "Always thought I knew everything about this town. But today, I realize how wrong I was." He went on to share his own story of financial hardship, a secret he had kept for years out of shame. "If it weren't for the kindness of a few neighbors, I might have ended up on the streets myself," he admitted, his vulnerability touching everyone present. The impact was immediate and profound. As Mr. Johnson stepped down, people rushed to embrace him, share their own stories, or simply offer a handshake of support. The event continued with renewed energy. The charity auction exceeded all expectations, raising triple the anticipated amount. Local businesses, moved by the day's events, pledged ongoing support for homeless initiatives. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Tom and Sarah found a quiet moment amidst the bustle. They watched as Emily and Jake led a group of children in making care packages for the local shelter. "We did it," Sarah whispered, squeezing Tom's hand. Tom nodded, his eyes misty. "No, we all did it. The whole town." They realized that this event wasn't just about raising money or awareness. It was the beginning of a profound change in Maplewood, a reawakening of community spirit and empathy that would continue long after the last banner was taken down. In the weeks following the successful community event, Ray's Foundation began to gain significant traction in Maplewood. The surge of interest and support that had been ignited during the fundraiser continued to grow, attracting attention from neighboring towns and even catching the eye of regional media. Tom and Sarah found themselves at the center of this whirlwind of activity. Their phone rang constantly with calls from new volunteers eager to get involved and potential donors looking to contribute. The basement of their home, once cluttered with old toys and forgotten projects, had been transformed into a makeshift office for the Foundation's local chapter. "I never thought we'd need a separate phone line for volunteer coordination," Tom remarked one evening, reviewing a stack of applications. Sarah nodded, her laptop open to a spreadsheet of incoming donations. "Or that we'd be managing a six-figure budget for community projects," she added, still in disbelief at the numbers before her. The success of the Foundation brought new challenges and opportunities. Tom and Sarah, once focused solely on making ends meet for their family, now found themselves inspired to dedicate more time to their community work. They began to reassess their priorities, considering how they could balance their regular jobs with their growing commitment to the Foundation. Emily and Jake, too, had thrown themselves wholeheartedly into the cause. At school, they had become known as the go-to students for organizing charity drives and awareness campaigns. Emily had started a club dedicated to youth homelessness awareness, while Jake used his artistic talents to create posters and flyers for various Foundation events. "Mom, Dad, can we skip our summer vacation this year and volunteer at the shelter instead?" Emily asked one night at dinner, catching her parents off guard. Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and maybe we could organize a summer camp for kids from the shelter." Tom and Sarah exchanged proud glances, marveling at how much their children had grown and matured through this experience. The transformation wasn't limited to the Miller family. Throughout Maplewood, there was a palpable shift in attitude. Neighbors who had once turned a blind eye to social issues were now actively engaging in community service. The town's annual budget meeting saw unprecedented support for increasing funding to social programs. As the Foundation's influence grew, so did the Millers' sense of purpose. They were no longer just a family trying to survive. They had become catalysts for change, inspiring others to embrace empathy and take action. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness on a cold winter night had blossomed into a movement that was reshaping their community, one compassionate act at a time. A year had passed since the night Ray appeared on the Millers' doorstep, and Maplewood had undergone a remarkable transformation. The once quiet town now buzzed with a sense of purpose and community spirit. New support programs had sprung up, addressing issues from food insecurity to job training for the homeless. On a warm summer evening, the Millers gathered with other foundation members for their annual review meeting. The community center's main hall was filled with faces both familiar and new, all united by a common cause. Ray stood at the podium, his expression a mix of pride and determination. "What we've achieved here in Maplewood is extraordinary," he began, "but it's only the beginning." A ripple of excitement ran through the crowd as Ray revealed his broader vision. "Our goal was never just to change one town," he explained. "We aim to create a model of community transformation that could be replicated across the country." Tom and Sarah listened intently, their minds racing with possibilities. They had come so far from the struggling family they once were, now confident leaders in their community. As Ray concluded his speech, he invited the Millers to join him on stage. "Tom, Sarah," he said, turning to them, "your family's journey has been at the heart of Maplewood's transformation. How do you feel about taking this model to other cities?" The room fell silent, all eyes on the Millers. Tom and Sarah exchanged glances, a year's worth of experiences flashing between them. "It won't be easy," Tom began, his voice steady. "We'll face new challenges, new resistances." Sarah nodded, then added with a smile, "But if Maplewood can change, any town can. We're ready to try." The room erupted in applause. As the meeting continued, discussions turned to logistics, how to identify other communities, how to tailor the approach to different demographics, how to measure success. Later that night, as the Millers walked home under a starry sky, they reflected on the journey ahead. "Are we really ready for this?" Sarah asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Tom squeezed her hand. "A year ago, we weren't ready to invite a stranger into our home. Look how that turned out." They laughed, remembering their initial fears and hesitations. Those fears seemed distant now, replaced by a confidence born from experience and a deep-seated belief in the power of community. As they approached their house, they saw Emily and Jake waiting on the porch, eager to hear about the meeting. The Millers smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family and as part of something much bigger than themselves. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness was now poised to touch lives far beyond the borders of Maplewood, carrying with it the transformative power of empathy. The Millers' newfound role as ambassadors for Ray's Foundation led them to unexpected places. One crisp autumn morning, Tom found himself volunteering at a shelter in a neighboring town. As he sorted through donations, a familiar face caught his eye. Mr. Johnson, their once skeptical neighbor, was there too, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Curious, Tom approached him. "Mr. Johnson, I didn't expect to see you here." The older man's eyes darted nervously. "Just helping out," he mumbled, quickly excusing himself. Tom's instincts told him something was off. Over the next few days, he discreetly inquired about Mr. Johnson's involvement with the foundation. What he uncovered shocked him to his core. Mr. Johnson, it turned out, had a hidden past. Before moving to Maplewood, he had been involved in a series of fraudulent charities, siphoning funds meant for the homeless. His apparent change of heart had been a clever ruse to infiltrate Ray's Foundation. Tom shared his findings with Sarah, both of them struggling to reconcile the neighbor they thought they knew with this disturbing revelation. "We have to tell Ray," Sarah said firmly. As the truth came to light, Mr. Johnson launched a desperate campaign to discredit Ray and the Foundation. He spread rumors questioning Ray's intentions and the legitimacy of the Foundation's work. The community that had come together so strongly now faced a test of trust. Some began to doubt, old prejudices resurfacing amidst the uncertainty. Ray called an emergency meeting to address the allegations. The town hall was packed, tension thick in the air. "I know many of you have questions," Ray began, his voice steady. "And you deserve answers." He proceeded to lay bare the foundation's finances, explaining every allocation of funds with transparent honesty. Then, he turned to address Mr. Johnson's accusations directly. "We are not perfect," Ray admitted, "but our mission is pure. We've made mistakes, but deception has never been one of them." As Ray spoke, Tom noticed Mr. Johnson shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Unable to contain himself, Mr. Johnson stood up, his face red with shame. "It's all true," he blurted out, silencing the room. "I'm the fraud, not them." In the days that followed, the truth of Mr. Johnson's past came to light. The community, though shaken, rallied around the foundation with renewed vigor. The Millers found themselves at the forefront once again, this time helping to rebuild trust and strengthen the foundation's transparency measures. As the dust settled, the family received an unexpected honor. They were awarded the town's Citizenship Award for their unwavering commitment to the community. Standing on the podium, surrounded by those they had helped and those who had supported them, the Millers realized that their journey of empathy had not just transformed their town, it had transformed them. Ray, watching from the audience, smiled proudly. The Millers had become more than volunteers or even leaders. They were now mentors, ready to guide other families on the same transformative path of empathy and community service.